At Lowe's, we know pros can get the job done faster if they don't have to stop and come into the store all the time. That's why we've updated our app with your needs in mind. You can build a quote, reorder supplies, or authorize a crew member to make purchases in the store. So you can get the supplies you need right away. Stay on the job, finish it, and get started on the next one. Download the app today, because Lowe's knows time is money. Lowe's knows pros.
Get to the chopper! Here's Johnny. This is Sparta! Autobots, roll out.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to this podcast review episode for April 2nd, 2023. I am Brendan Cassidy.
And I'm Ryan McQuaid.
Thanks for joining us this week, everyone. Ryan, thanks for joining me on this podcast review. As we're recording this, we just finished episode 528 talking about our movie stars draft. At this point now, that episode should be available. It should have come out before this, so hopefully you got a chance to listen to myself, you, and Jay Ledbetter put together our movie stars list and our drafts there. But the reason we talked about that being our main topic for that episode is really due to one Chris Pine, who is in the movie that we're going to be talking about here. So it's going to be one of those reviews. We're going to roll the dice. We're going to get into the role-playing action here.
Here we go.
Talking about some dungeons, and I'm full with these puns right now.
Yeah, let's go. He's Brendan's gone full puns ever since JD's left, and I'm kind of into it. I'm
trying to
into
take
this
over.
new punch stuff.
I want to be a dad someday, so I'm just trying to practice the dad jokes. That's what I'm doing.
Listen, I'm the same way. I've been on the pun action for a long time, as you know, and I've learned from the best. I learned from Jay. And now it's kind of because we're all collaborating. Now it's seeping into your life. So pun away, my friend. It's fine.
It's like a disease. It's like a disease.
No, I mean, this is like, it makes me comfortable doing stuff with you now because you're just like punning it up, punning it over here, punning it over there.
It's like this competitive thing. We want to try and be the funny guy for a little while and at least crack a joke.
I just sit back and I'm just like, I just deadpan it now. I feel like I just bring my own flavor to it.
Imagine if we did a whole podcast where we just like deadpan the entire review.
I'm telling you, if we just did it like this, man, our listeners, they would just hate it. But anyway, that's beside the point.
Maybe we can get someone like Aubrey Plaza on the show, who is the
that'd be really good
doing that. That'd be
just
amazing.
Get Harrison Ford on. Just be like,
be there. Yeah, absolutely. All right, we're already getting down a rabbit hole. So you already made your promise accurate here, Ryan, by saying we might.
I know what I'm doing.
All right, but yes, for this review, we mentioned Chris Pine. He is obviously starring in a new movie this weekend called Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. It was a pretty big hit at the box office this week and doing numbers that I don't even think the crew and the filmmakers behind this movie were expecting, which is kind of interesting. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the movie as a whole, how well it functions as a movie. I guess getting into that, this is obviously Dungeons and Dragons, right, Ryan? Have you ever played D&D? Are you a D&D aficionado at all? Do you roll with the punches there?
Just say it. Are you a nerd?
We're all nerds. We're all nerds.
Say it.
Nerd is an all-encompassing term now, man.
Listen, because we live now in a world where basically nerd culture is main culture now. So,
nerd culture is cool. It's popular.
Sure. Some of it's cool, some of it is online discourse. All right. But
that's different.
Yeah, well, no, those are nerds.
But I mean, let's talk about nerds in a positive sense. Not really nerds. They're giving nerds a bad name as well.
You go online and rank your Star Wars movies, and you go out and see how many level-headed opinions you'll get from the nerd culture out there. But anyway, the idea of a Dungeons and Dragons movie in the modern era sounds like an absolute nightmare because we've seen this product before, right? I don't know if you ever saw the 2000s Dungeons and Dragons starring?
I did not. I mean, with what
Jeremy
Marlon Wayans and
Irons.
Jeremy Irons,
Yeah.
Thora Birch in that. I never saw it. Never saw that one.
Oh boy. What a
Based on that
cinematic
reaction,
delight.
based on that reaction, I should probably watch it sometime soon.
Did you ever see the old Mortal Kombat movie?
What the Paul W.S. Anderson one from the 90s?
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually kind of like that movie.
Okay, so you kind of like that. So imagine if like that movie only 10 times worse.
So basically more in line with Mortal Kombat Annihilation, the sequel to that
Yes.
movie. Okay.
Yeah. But definitely like all those aren't even like on the realm of like the fine okayness of like the new Mortal Kombat. You know what I mean? Which is kind of just like a decide what you want to be. You know what I mean? Do you want to be
Fair.
like a good movie or not? Or schlocky. This thing, on the other hand, Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves, right? Is that what it is? Honor Among Thieves?
Honor Among Thieves.
I just wanted to make sure for clarity sake here that I got the Dungeons and Dragons movie title correctly. A sentence I thought I'd never say on the InSession Film Podcast. But here we are. I got to tell you, this movie premiered at South by Southwest, my beloved South by Southwest. I was there for the night of the premiere.
Were the filmmakers there too?
The filmmakers were there. Everybody was there except Hugh Grant. Which mad respect to Hugh Grant for not showing up.
Yeah. I feel like we need to call them out because we didn't get a chance to mention who is behind this movie yet.
Yeah.
Because John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein, I think, are their names. The same duo behind Game Night, which was a surprise hit for many people. Of course, the beloved Vacation, their version of Vacation. Beloved.
Ooh.
Certain words there, I guess we can say.
That was a word that you could use to describe that movie for sure.
Yeah, it wouldn't be an accurate word, right?
Oh, it would not be. But Game Night, pleasant surprise. I like Game Night a lot.
Also a star-studded vehicle in its own way.
We got to mention the elephant in the room. Your hot take about Game Night.
I don't love Game Night. I don't love it.
No.
I don't love Jason Bateman and Rachel McAdams in it. I don't vibe with their chemistry. Everyone keeps referencing the that line that Rachel McAdams has.
He died.
I find it cringe. I don't find it funny.
Good.
And it's weird because I actually think Rachel McAdams is really funny in a lot of movies. At least in some of those comedies that she's been in the past, I think she's amazing in Mean Girls for one of her earlier roles.
She's incredible in that movie.
Yeah, but there's something about Game Night. I think it's because I found the supporting cast so strong in that movie that just selfishly, I wish it was more about them. Like Jesse Plemons, for instance.
I was going to say my MVP is Plemons. He is. Yeah. How would that be profitable for Frito-Lay? That is
that's the line I love. Yeah,
that's an all-time line when he lets him into the house and he just goes into the darkness. Like it's a kind of performance like that if I was around here, I would have given an InSession Film nomination. Or I was around here. Why didn't I give that an InSession? That sounds like
I feel like someone did. Maybe no one did. I don't know.
Maybe nobody did. Anyway, I made regrets in my life, but you know what wasn't a regret? Was Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves, because I sat there at the premiere of this movie, and you know what, Brendan? Which, by the way, I know your opinion on this already, so we're gonna have a little bit of fun here.
Okay,
I gotta tell you, I wasn't expecting much out of this movie. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
I do not think this is one of the great movies of the year that we are having coming out or is out or whatever.
Okay.
But I do think that this is just a pleasant surprise. And I think that this movie is a lot of fun, especially in the second half of the film. The first half of this film, I was just kind of almost lost a little bit. Like it has a lot of lore it's trying to throw out.
Mm-hmm.
It's trying to throw out a lot of jargon that just is going right over my head. But the chemistry of this cast kind of keeps it together. And I just kept going and plunging through and everything. And then it gets to the parts where, and I'm butchering his name, but Rene Jean Page or
Reggae Jean Page, I think is how you pronounce it.
Comes in and man, he comes in there and kind of steals it and does a good job. And I think Hugh Grant's having fun. I think Michelle Rodriguez and Chris Pine have good chemistry. And I think Justice Smith is actually kind of underrated in his solo stuff and his solo scenes that he has, and it's got a good little crew here, and it's got some good humor. There's some good jokes in there. The action itself is for a Dungeons and Dragons movie, not bad. It's a good little fun flick that is very disposable, and I don't remember half of the things that happen in it, because that's the point of a movie like this. It's a movie that like harkens back to, I think, movies of our childhood where they've got good humor and they've got some levity. Maybe if you're into them, they're super stupid, and I'm just like, I could pick this logic apart very easy.
Yeah.
But I just needed like a good time. I needed this movie to be competent, because the thing that came before it was trash. And this movie is competent, and it's also got some really interesting action set pieces. Like, I think the one sequence towards the middle of the film, I believe, where it's like the shapeshifter character in the film has to like retrieve something from the kingdom or whatever, and she is going through all these different animals, and they did a lot of mocap capturing. I've seen the video of that today, and
yeah, it was edited to look like one take, kind of filmmakers trying to replicate what they did with Game Night and the egg sequence there.
Yeah, and I think that this is actually like a lot cooler than something like that, because I thought that was kind of a headache in the film. Like,
I preferred in Game Night. I'll say that.
Okay, that's fair. I thought that was like, inventive way of because here's the thing, Brendan. We've seen so many of these kinds of movies, these, franchise starters, non-starters, and things like that. Mm-hmm. You got to have some stuff that stands out. You've got to have some things that make you different, because people are trying to go back to the movies now.
Yeah.
And this movie made 40 million, which is kind of like 15 million more than the projections, right? And it's a little bit of like a surprise. And I think the reason why is because it's got a good cast and it's fun, had a really great word of mouth. But Brendan, why don't you like it?
Well, it's interesting, even the positive thoughts you give this movie, even despite the slight reservations, it almost sounds like you're slightly more negative than the majority of people on the film yet, or at least regarding the film.
I think the movie is, I'm not like, listen, I'm not, it's not John Wick. All right. John Wick 4 slaps. All right. That movie, like that movie runs circles around this thing. But again, it's also about expectations. Like, I went into that movie, and I think that this is where you're going to come from.
Maybe,
I went into that movie with no goddamn expectations about that movie whatsoever, because I'm like, the opening night movie the year before was Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yeah.
So they got a Dungeons and Dragons movie I could care less about.
Yeah.
Let me just see what this thing is. And I had a decent time with it. I had fun with it. Like, a disposable amount of time. Like, that's not a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing. And you make a great point that in the case of something like this, when you see a movie sometimes matters.
It does.
And in a case like this with Dungeons and Dragons, Honor Among Thieves specifically, I'm willing to admit that maybe the hype was just the enemy for me here. And there is, the movie has this word of mouth right now that I just don't think it lives up to. I thought the film was pretty mundane, honestly. And I know that there's been a lot of praise directed at it for how it feels like it came from a different blockbuster era. I've heard some people say it feels like Mask of Zorro or The Mummy or Pirates of the Caribbean.
No.
I don't agree with that.
No, those movies are practical, and this movie is CGI.
I'll get into that. Like, I do think you're right that there are some rather inventive sequences here, not just from an action standpoint, but comedically. There are at least 3 sequences I can think of that I know I'm going to remember that either really made me laugh or just had some inventive quality to it that I'm not going to forget it, at least throughout the duration of the year. But if I disregard some of those things, the movie still carries many of the same quippy traits that are all over the current blockbuster landscape. And not to mention, it still has this similar cheap, desaturated visual palette that many even modern superhero movies have. Like, basically what I feel like I'm being harder on this film than I should, because I don't really see why this is being looked upon as a quote unquote better example of modern blockbuster filmmaking. It
Mm.
feels like the same thing for me. And again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. You know, to your point, if all you're looking for is disposable fun, and I saw this at an early enough in an early enough way that I didn't have those preconceived notions clouding my judgment, I probably could have had more of a good time with this. But I find myself wondering, like, why is this one so different than something else that would be coming out sometime this year? I'm not seeing it just yet. Is it because it's not a sequel to an existing IP? Is it because it was based on a game and we know how the reputation is for those kinds of adaptations? Um, is it because we already had a Dungeons and Dragons movie in the year 2000 that wasn't very good, as you talked about? I mean, I'm not trying to say that the movie is not deserving of any praise. I'm glad that there are people out there who are embracing it, who are perhaps seeing things in it that I just didn't see.
Mm.
But what I felt like I saw was just very safe and run of the mill, which I don't feel like was promised.
Mm.
And, you know, especially considering that the source material here, Dungeons and Dragons, is something that was built on imagination and
Mm.
creativity.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't sense much of that here. And
Mm.
that's, again, is that the movie's fault? Maybe not. Might be more my fault. But
Mm.
I did find the experience kind of mundane because of that.
Mm. Man, I'm just going to dive into you a little bit here, Brendan.
Okay.
Jump into those eyes, those casty eyes. Um, can I ask you, because you have I'm not saying you have a problem here, but you're
Yeah.
pointing to something that Jay and I and yourself and JD have talked about, which is the sort of quippiness and the formulaic,
Hmm.
right, sort of style that this film presents. That you're saying that this film presents. If you don't mind, I hate being up for comparison's sake,
I
but
think I know where you're going with this, but
do you
I'll
have
allow the
like
question.
do you have like some films in mind that when you were watching this, you kind of thought about, this is the same sort of vibe I felt when I was watching this, or the same sort of vibe when I was watching that?
This felt like Marvel Phase 4 to me.
Okay, all right,
Uh,
perfect.
eh,
Because
yeah,
I knew you were gonna kind of go there, and
yeah,
I didn't want to
I
jump
didn't
that.
want to make,
You know,
yeah, I didn't want to make the Marvel comparison, but in a way, I
I
feel
know.
like I kind of have to. And again, it's not really a knock on Marvel Phase 4 in general because they've made some movies I really liked. You know, I really
Yeah.
like Shang-Chi. As an example, I thought Eternals was really bold and daring. I thought that was a
Yeah.
really interesting movie. I guess the reason why I bring up Marvel is because while I don't necessarily agree with this criticism, there is an outspoken criticism from many critics out there that the Marvel formula is getting tired. It's getting repetitive. It's getting
Mm-hmm.
it's getting too saturated, if you will.
Yeah.
And I, I look at the people saying that who are also saying that this movie, Dungeons and Dragons, is really good. And I'm thinking, is that kind of a contradictory statement? Because I don't really feel like, at least what I saw in the mind space or the headspace that I was in when I saw it, I didn't really sense this movie doing much different than what most blockbusters are doing nowadays. And I feel like the praise has been, this is a breath of fresh air. And I
Mm.
don't think that it is.
Yeah. No, I can see those kind of frustrations with this sort of property right now,
Mhm.
and this style. I will say this to kind of help you out here a little bit, Brendan.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Is is that I think the reason why this is the case is because there is like enough. I'm going to try to say this the best way I can. One, I think a lot of that is there. I mean, let's just call it like it is. There's a lot of people out there that are just like, I'm tired of Marvel.
Yeah.
I'm tired of their formula. And yes, their formulas broke this. I think that I think the reason why that is the case is just because you're like 30 films into a franchise, and people are tired of it. But I will say this at the same token, though, like this movie, to defend it just a bit, like these are two guys that made a really popular, funny film that I know you're not like on the lesser end of the spectrum of.
Yeah. I'm mixed on it.
So,
It's
so
okay.
their brand of humor was very commercial and is very successful,
Fair.
and I will say is splashed around a lot in this movie, and I don't think people thought it would be as funny as it was. I think that the cast does a lot of the heavy lifting here, much like in Game Night. They are the ones that are carrying a lot of the weight, and then you buy in with this cast. But I think a lot of it is the genuine surprise, because there are expectations for MCU movies now, that when you watch an MCU movie, you go, there's a certain level. Because like the reason why I think Phase 4 has gotten a lot of hate is because Endgame was so good. And I think a lot of people loved Endgame.
Maybe. Yeah.
And I think every time you top yourself, you're expected to be on that level. You know what I mean? It's like anytime LeBron James plays a game and he doesn't get 30 points and 15 rebounds and 10 assists, then somebody out there or everybody out there is going to say, oh, he's gone downhill.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, no, they're still pretty good, and there's going to be nights where they're going to have off nights. There's going to be some quantumaniums out there. That's for sure. You know what I mean? But that doesn't mean that the overall product isn't good, because like, yes, Shang-Chi and Eternals and a lot of people love No Way Home. I like it.
I like it too. I didn't mention that, but I do like that one. Yeah,
I like that movie. And I know you and I differ. I like Multiverse of Madness, and
I'm trying to like that one more. I'm really trying to.
and I mean, and like Thor: Love and Thunder, I was like, I went in that movie with the absolute expectations of, it's Taika Waititi making a Thor movie. I know exactly what I'm going to get here. That's exactly what I got. And I'm not expecting some grand other thing, out of it. And I think that that's my sort of expectations for these things now. It's like, I'm not going in there with like, these are going to hit home runs. And I don't think this is a home run. This is a like solid double up the middle. And you're like, wow, I didn't know that catcher had that kind of power behind him. You know what I mean? Good for them. They may never hit another mark like this ever again. Good for them. If they get across the home plate, I would be surprised. And I think this movie kind of like gets there, but I don't think it's a masterpiece. Like it being at 91% on Rotten Tomatoes and it being like high on Metacritic, and
it's like a 72 on Metacritic, which is, I mean,
average.
According to Metacritic's criteria, that's I mean, some Best Picture nominees have been less than that.
Well, I mean, we had to get there, Brendan, but but no, I think like, I think you can't really look into that, and I try to temper as much expectations as I can. I think that's what it is. But as far as like the template is concerned, like, I don't know, Chris Pine's a pretty decently funny guy, and I think Grant's pretty funny, and like I think like the cast themselves are known for being pretty like funny people.
It is, they are. You the way you're talking there, you raise a pretty interesting potential question and topic out of this, and given how bountiful, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is, especially. Have we maybe become conditioned to a certain type of blockbuster now, psychologically speaking? So, and maybe that's my reaction to this, that I'm sensing too many similarities when I shouldn't be. Maybe there are new things I'm missing out on, or vice versa. Maybe I'm, or just people are finding the things that are working so well because it's slightly different, and they're over amplifying those. I don't know. It
might be that
there's a worthy conversation to have here. I think the moral is, if I did see this movie before knowing what people were saying about it, I might have liked it more, because I do think the cast here is overall pretty good. This is not my favorite that Chris Pine has been. I mean, in many ways, he's kind of doing like a lightened version of his usual shtick from Star Trek in some ways. But he's charming. He's a charming presence here. Michelle Rodriguez is good as well. Regé-Jean Page is far and away the standout for me.
He's great.
And he's not in the movie a ton. He really only has one side quest that he's involved in. And first off, I actually like the narrative structure here and how it kind of mirrors Dungeons and Dragons as gameplay. That there are like a bunch of side quests. But his especially, and how he gets involved, is very entertaining, and mostly it's due to him. Like, there's one sequence, and mostly it's Chris Pine's reaction, but his walk off screen
Yeah,
involving a
it's
rock is
incredible.
got the best laugh out of me. That was really good.
It's really good stuff there. I like Hugh Grant just because, like, Hugh Grant.
Let's see Grant, of course.
I mean, Hugh Grant's never bad. Former InSession Film Best Supporting Actor winner for me. Hugh Grant for The Gentleman in 2020.
Oh yeah,
look it up. He's great. But, and I think
he's really good in that.
Wasn't
movie.
he like a nominee for all of us too, for like Paddington 2, for Christ's sake?
Maybe. I don't know if
but,
it was for all of us, but I know he definitely was for me.
I know. I want to say I nominated him. If I didn't, I apologize, and I retroactively nominate him for that film. He should have been nominated for an Oscar. It's ridiculous. That movie is amazing. It's the movie that made Pedro Pascal and Nicolas Cage want to be better men. Thank you very much. But I think he's great, and he's just being himself in this, and he's got good stuff. But yes, Page is fantastic in this movie, and Pine's listen, Pine's doing exactly what you're asking him to do. He's being he's like what we talked about in the movie Star Draft. He's being like that Clooney. You gotta, you have all these other stars or these, up and comers or whatever. You bring in a veteran, sort of like movie star, quote unquote, with charisma, and you say, hey, be the leader of this team. And he kind of does that, and he does it really well.
He does. He does carry some similar Chris-isms that we would have seen from maybe like a Chris Pratt in Guardians. In fact, I hate making these comparisons to Marvel. I really should stop, but I do have to bring one more in, because the second that Regé-Jean Page's character is introduced, and one of his quirks is kind of how he takes things a little bit, I don't want to say literally, but he doesn't seem to understand the modern dialect of these other characters. I kept thinking how similar that was to Drax. And I started thinking, I wouldn't be surprised if the pitch for this movie was the Guardians of the Galaxy sit down to play Dungeons and Dragons, and let's make a movie about it. And again, not necessarily a bad thing, but given the response that this movie has received from many audiences and critics, I feel like that's maybe too familiar of a thing. And maybe that's my issue. Again, that could be more of a me thing. I'm willing to admit that, but I kind of don't think this movie's living up to the promise that its reputation is representing, if that makes sense.
I mean, that makes sense. I will say also, Pine's my guy. Has been for a long time. So, I mean, I will be unapologetic, and I will take no slander against Chris Pine tonight. But
I didn't say he was bad. I just said
I said no slander.
I
said no slander. Sorry. But no, I think he's, I know, I said this in that episode too, Brendan, it's like, it's the thing that kind of Clooney got away with for years. It's like, people think he's just playing the one thing, and it's not easy to do, and it's not easy to have. And either some people have it and some people don't, and are able to carry it from one thing to the other. And I think Pine carries it effortlessly. And I think that's why he's so good at what he does when he has when he's got good material and he's around good people to kind of build off of. And he's not being like, Mr. I'm going to save the world or anything like that. He's just a planner. That's what he is. He's a planner, and he's kind of having to come up with it. And he's having to be kind of the smarts of it, which I kind of think is great. And then like Michelle Rodriguez is the muscle in here too. I do think that some of the things that I think are really stupid or kind of goofy in it is like the stuff with the daughter. I just had no interest in whatsoever. I think that a lot of that's just wasted opportunities.
That felt rushed.
Very rushed. And
I like the intent of what it's going for emotionally and thematically, especially by the end. But I think that's just more of a matter of any movie trying to juggle all of these different tonal extremes and not being able to, I hate saying this word because I use it all the time, but not being able to earn what it's going for at the end.
But I do think you brought up an interesting point earlier, Brendan. I think that this might be also a nugget that answers, and you might have just answered your own question a little bit too.
Okay.
Is that the people that are liking this also probably played Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah, that's a fair point.
And the structure of this movie is that of side quests and this mythology and
There's a lot of exposition here, and
Yeah.
honestly, I didn't necessarily mind that because I know that sort of is par for the course when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons as a property.
Yeah, like that, that is like it's exposition the game.
Yeah.
Like it's about like literally like somebody trying to be the smartest son of a gun on the planet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what the movie does, and it has to be like a little bit of like word vomit. I think there's like there's some fun gags that happen, like like you can just imagine if somebody is reading the script at a Dungeons and Dragons party. That it's playing over like gangbusters, and I think that's kind of the goal of it. Like, I mean, like if somebody's doing all the voices of like the people in the graveyard, right, of them trying to dig up using the spell or whatever to like bring those guys back to life, which was kind of, I felt like a little bit of like Raimi inspiration there or something like that there for sure, and stuff like that. I was sitting, or my Python even a little bit there too.
I heard that comparison before as well. Yeah.
And I was kind of sitting there. I was like, okay, I can get that. You know what I mean? But that's what Dungeons and Dragons is. It is influence upon influence upon influence upon influence to then recreate something that is completely then wholly original within that experience. So I think that's the reason why a lot of people might also be like really into this is that it mirrors that experience enough of its silliness to get there.
I'm not a D&D aficionado by any means. I've only ever done one single one shot of D&D in my life with a couple friends. But even so, you're right. Like the way that you create narrative and the way you get creative, it's kind of like a screenwriting exercise in some ways when you play and you build off of that. Like you're saying, everything is all connected. It's very much represented here. This definitely does feel very faithful to the passion of D&D and what it ultimately means, which is why looking at the film and what we got, the issues I have with it are really more due to how the film feels and functions as a movie, because as a piece of script writing, I actually think the script is pretty good. Like I think the writing is actually one of its strongest parts. The problems I have are mostly really due to Francis Daley and Goldstein as directors. I don't, and let's look back at the MCU once again. They are tied to the MCU. They did co-write Spider-Man: Homecoming. Again, there was some good dialogue there that was fun, and as much as I don't always love John Watts as a director, he at least did something to that movie that I think gave it a bit of a visual personality, which I don't think this movie, Honor Among Thieves specifically, is quite doing. I don't know if Francis Daley and Goldstein are the right directors for their own material sometimes. And that's where I kind of felt like what was passion on the page came off as a little more passionless here, given the landscape of blockbusters. And it's sad for me to feel that way, because like I like a lot of what this film seems to be doing. There are moments that made me laugh. The whole corpse reviving of the corpses sequence really is funny. I know the trailers give it away, but it's well timed. It's well edited.
They gave that away in the trailers?
They did. Yeah.
Oh God. See, that's the other thing.
Yeah.
I don't watch trailers anymore, Brendan. I really try to get away from them because I just like you and Jay. I keep trying to not bring this review up because I'm not trying to get the numbers up here at all or at InSession Film. But like the Shazam trailer this year was another example of just like, what in the hell are we doing? Because that whole second trailer gives away the entire film. The last trailer for Ant-Man Quantumanium gives away the entire third act, essentially, and pretty much all the emotional stakes was, and I just kind of sit there and like, what are we doing?
That's a great point about Shazam. Yeah, because I think back on that main trailer and I think, wow, that moment was from the final act. That was from the final act. That was from the final act. That was from the final act. Very rarely now do we get something where it's like everything we saw in the trailer is only from the first 30 minutes.
So that's why, like nowadays, like shout out to Warner Brothers for Barbie, but like they're supposed to have a new one come out this week. Not going to watch it. The teaser was good enough. Teaser was good enough, and I'm going to see it. So like that's the other thing too. Most of these things I'm going to see. I just need a poster. I think I just need a poster. That's all I need nowadays. I need a poster and a confirmation that it's coming out, and then I'm going to see it. So like. Yeah, that would be. I agree with you. I sympathize with you about the fact that if I saw gags like the one I saw on this, or there is a specific cameo that is in this movie,
That did not work for me.
okay, in the
Which
moment, had no idea that was coming,
I didn't
and
either. I didn't either. It was a
I kind of
surprise.
thought to myself, well, given who it was, I was like, okay, you get a pass here. And I
Mhm.
also thought it was like really stupid, but like, stupid in a way that was like, all right, whatever. You know what I mean?
When you
Like,
say it that way, I really want to defend it because
yeah, like, I
it
mean,
kind of
I
makes
think
no sense, but
it makes no
it's
sense. It's kind of stupid. And also like it may, this is a movie, Brendan, you got to turn your brain off. You know what I mean? For,
Mhm.
and I was sitting there kind of turning my brain back on like, how the hell did he get involved with this? Like, how does he sign up for something like
I
this?
know.
Who gives the call to get
Well,
him in this?
I
It was
I think the reason why it didn't work for me is because it's a cameo that's trying to support another joke that could have been funny on its own without the cameo. And
yeah,
and then all of a sudden I find what could have been funny about that sequence distracting because I'm constantly thinking about what is this person doing in this movie. So it's kind of one of those cases where the joke then starts to collapse on itself for me. But again, this may have worked more for other people. They're able to see it as a compliment to that joke.
yeah.
And to many people, it seems like it sounds like it worked for you in that regard.
I mean, it
It's
worked for me.
wild though.
It worked for me from the standpoint of like, what the hell are we doing here? Like, this is we're literally going on this quest, and then we stop here, and then it's like
Yeah.
we're here for like 2 minutes, and it just honestly it doesn't really go anywhere. But it's also
It's
like
bizarre. It's bizarre.
it's
And
very
now
bizarre.
I feel the urge to defend it now, just talking about it in this way. It's the weirdest moment of the movie, and it's a
Yeah.
kind of weird I wish the movie had more of.
Yeah, I wish it had like, but because like that's the thing about it. It's like you don't have the rest of this energy throughout the rest of this movie, but yet you put this in here, and I kind of wish you did. But then also I'm like, but then my brain's turning like, how the hell did he get signed up for this? Why is he doing this? Like,
Yeah.
it's
Did he just happen to be walking by set and they
yeah. Was he like in the middle of reshoots for the movie he's directing and landed here? Like, I don't know. It was
Mhm.
bizarre. But
It
yeah,
was
then I mean, it didn't also help too that like, and I just want to, I'm not gonna rip anybody, but like the program director at South by Southwest basically like said also too, like, oh, you're gonna just love this fat dragon character or whatever, and I'm like, what the hell? And then so like that moment was like that's the thing, Brendan, and I
Mhm.
don't know if you are like this, but like if you tell me something's in the movie, the whole time I'm just sitting there waiting to see that moment. In my head I'm like, oh yeah, but we haven't gotten to Fat Dragon yet, so like when we get to Fat Dragon, then I can see what this is all about.
Well, even though
Like,
like
know,
I I
like
I
in a
thought I
trailer you're like, we this movie can't be over because I got Fat Dragon to see or
again,
something.
from a script writing standpoint, the idea of a chubby dragon attacking these people is pretty brilliant and kind of
Yeah.
off the cuff. But again, in execution, I found myself thinking like the staging is just so like borderline familiar or something. Like
It's a little sloppy.
it's not even that it's sloppy. It just doesn't feel like and it feels like all the creativity in that sequence went to the idea of a chubby dragon.
Yeah.
And maybe that's all people need. The idea is enough, but I found myself thinking this just I'm wishing for more personality from a filmmaking
That's
standpoint
fair.
there because I like that idea and I in the moment I at least like the character camaraderie of trying to combat this thing. Justice Smith, you mentioned his name earlier. I actually think he's very good here too, and I was kind of
Mhm.
surprised to admit that given his reputation in the Jurassic World movies and how he was basically just the glorified screamer is basically all he was in those
Yep.
movies. But here, like if we talk about personality, he has a lot of it here, and I think he's very good too.
There's Sophia Lillis too alongside him
Yeah, her
is
character is very underwritten, but she's at least got a
yeah.
charming presence about her.
Yeah.
Looking at the cast again as well, I did want to call out again, a very underwritten character, but Daisy Head as the villain of sorts. At least, she
Oh,
has kind of a haunting presence about her, and some of that just might be the visual supporting it, but
yeah,
uh,
but that
ki
overall that character
it's a wasted character, it really
it's
is.
so wasted. It's
Yeah.
like it it screams of like, we watched the Sam Raimi movie once. You know what I mean?
It is kind of Sam
Like,
Raimi-esque. You're right. Yeah.
yeah, it's we've seen Evil Dead. You know what I mean? What if we had like a deadite that was like a witch? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then yeah, and like I think the thing about like Hugh Grant in this movie is he's playing like the functioning buffoon that you see in a lot of like those 90s 2000s action vehicles that we love so much, Brendan. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the guy that's in The Mummy, you know what I mean? That's like Benny the Friend or whatever that like goes with Emotep in
Oh
that
yeah.
movie.
What's his name? Henry O'Connor or something like that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that or whatnot. You know what I mean? Like Grant's kind of
Yeah.
playing that shtick. And he does it. I'm telling you, I think like you can't go wrong with putting Hugh Grant in a movie. He's going to give you some good lines, and he's just going to put on that beautiful smile of his, and it's just going to work out.
Yeah.
But like you know he was going to be a bad guy from like the moment he was like signed up for this
Yeah.
whole thing. It feels like, and I think that would be the one thing is just like most of the characters, while they're interesting as a group or whatnot, they are very much just the standard like kind of just basic outline of what they're supposed to be. But that's kind of
Yeah.
the point of Dungeons and Dragons is like you can pick any one of these, and then they elevate above their station based off of the quest.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, yeah, and I
yeah,
guess in that way I do wish maybe the movie was a little bit more meta in that regard and didn't quite
yeah,
get there. First off, I stand corrected. It was Kevin J. O'Connor who
Kevin J.
played Benny from The Mummy, who was also
Apologize,
in There Will Be
Kevin.
Blood. Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
wanted to get that name right. But yeah, with regard to what you're talking about there, I think it's a great idea. And I think the script, maybe on its own terms, kind of reflects that notion a little bit, sort of having that, project yourself into these characters and kind of get a little creative with it. And I don't know if the actors do quite enough, or I feel like they weren't quite directed enough to do so.
Yeah.
Which is a weird thing to say because if this does get a sequel, and based on the box office numbers, it might. I mean, there might be a potential sequel
It's
for
gonna be
this.
close. It's gonna be close.
I wouldn't mind seeing a sequel with these people again. Like, I feel like there is real potential here with these actors to do something really wonky and weird with this property.
Yeah.
And I think they could do it, and I hope they do, and I'd be excited to see them again. I just don't think this was the movie to really kickstart that properly.
Well, I think though, in its defense, is
Mhm.
you got to start at this base level to get you into
I
this
guess.
world and everything like this before,
Yeah.
like you're saying,
And
going wonky because
introduce it to people who
audience,
haven't played the game and stuff like that.
yeah. Because to be fair, I mean, audiences, if you go that wonky route to start, people are going to be like, yeah, this is too weird. I'm not doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if it goes
Yeah, it's
too
fair.
lore-y, into the lore, then and just jumps right in there. Even though this movie does have a lot of lore in it,
It does. Yeah.
like I think that you can get hung up on them. But like, yes, it does lean on its tropes heavily. But again, like the game leans on the tropes of everything that's come before in the sort of fantasy action sort of genre. And it to me, I agree with you. I think the script is great from the standpoint of like you made a competent, good. At times I chuckled and
Mhm.
didn't regret going to this nearly as much as the product before or the idea of this in general. Because this is for a studio to do this,
Yeah.
Brendan. It is a stupid idea to greenlight this.
It
Like
kind of
it really,
is. Yeah.
like honestly, it is a stupid idea in the year of our Lord 2023
Mhm.
to greenlight a Dungeons and Dragons movie in the world of like we want to make money at the box office. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It really is because like this is a property that like this is testing the market at a rate in which we rarely get to see. And usually in the last couple of years, 9 times out of 10, these things not doing so well.
Yeah.
But you've got all these great factors coming together and great buzz, and it's actually kind of smart to premiere it at South by.
Yeah.
And get that buzz out there. Maybe not obviously for you, Brendan. Sorry,
I
but
guess,
but
yeah. Well, in
but
fact, the
like,
reaction at South by kind of killed it for me in
yeah,
many ways.
I'm sorry I killed it for you.
Yeah, it's all your fault, Ryan. You're the reason I hate this movie.
I just literally just wrote a review and was like, okay, I'm done with my duties there. But no, I mean, like, I agree with you. I would like to see this world fleshed out more. I'd like to maybe have a proper villain. And I would like to see these characters now maybe extend upon the abilities that they have and really
Yeah.
go full on crazy. Like, it has the makings of like, okay, you've made a good movie, now what you got?
Yeah.
And I
It's
hope maybe
interesting that
that
we're in a
means,
time where we have to test audiences by making a very safe but decent movie before you get weird and wonky with the sequel.
I mean, yeah, but you know what? Also, too, it's like, you make a simple premise of a guy who gets a dog, and then the dog dies, and then he goes on a murderous rampage in the middle of New York City, and people see a trailer and they think, oh, that movie looks stupid, and then it becomes now maybe the best franchise currently we have working today. So, and that
Yeah.
takes time and 10 years. So you got to start somewhere, and I think start small and then go big, rather than go big and then and then you're
Yeah.
stuck with a $200 million
You, you,
hole.
you can go small and reliable as opposed to just going safe. And
Yeah.
I do feel like this one kind of straddles the line more than the latter at times.
Yeah,
And that's kind of
maybe,
my
but
issue with it.
I think directorially, you're absolutely correct. I think from the
Yeah.
writing and from what the actors are giving off of that and the chemistry between the group, um, I think that alone is like enough to be like, okay, if I had to see Dungeons and Dragons or Shazam, which am
Mhm.
I taking my family? And sorry, Zachary Levi, I'm taking him to Dungeons
I
and
still
Dragons.
like this a lot more than Shazam. Well, let me make
Yeah.
that clear. I like it a lot more than Shazam Fury
Those
of the
poor
Gods.
families that had to choose between Shazam and John Wick 4 on that Instagram
Oh my
live.
gosh, yeah.
I feel really bad for him because like you're literally like he's talking about like you don't want to see a movie with guns, and I'm like, why? You're gonna put a gun to their head and make them watch this bad movie?
Yeah,
Anyway,
exactly.
that's beside the point. But yeah, it's not a bad movie. It's not a great movie. It's definitely not worth the praise that it's got. This like thunderous, like, I think that it's a little crazy that it's like at a 91, but also too, there are a lot of movies on Rotten Tomatoes. I sit there and I go, how is that high? Like, I think like it's
Rotten
really
Tomatoes
testing
is
that
it's
it's
such a I mean, people forget how Rotten Tomatoes sometimes works, and I think it's not always reflective that it doesn't
Mhm.
mean that this movie's a 91% as in it's like an A- movie. I mean, in many
No,
ways, a movie gets 100 reviews. All of
the
those
average
reviews could be
review.
like a 6.5 out of 10, and then it gets
Yeah.
100%. Um, it's
Yeah, I think
interesting.
also too the thing about Rotten Tomatoes is just about like the journalists getting on there now and being able to get visibility and stuff for their work. It's not even really
It's
about the
it's a
scores
platform for
anymore.
that, and I
Yeah,
respect it for those reasons.
yeah.
But yeah, with regard to Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves, as far as some final thoughts here, I do at least want to call out Lauren Balfe's score, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
I think the music here at least fits the fantasy setting, and I will say this, Ryan, which might sound a bit contradictory for me.
Here we go.
As much as I didn't really love the film, I feel the urge to still recommend it to people.
Yeah.
And I think it's really just because of the fact that it is its own thing.
Yeah.
And I'd rather recommend movies like this that are meant to kickstart something new as opposed to just exist within. And that's not, I mean, we get great movies that exist within IPs. Like and I recommend those just as much for their own respective reasons. But there is something kind of fresh and exciting when it's not part of that.
Yeah.
And I think that there is potential for a sequel to this movie to do something really interesting, and I'd be curious for that. Even though I don't love this experience, I do at least hope this film does well, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's the hope of um of the shiny new thing in front of me can maybe change the perspective
Mm-hmm.
of the cinematic landscape. And because I mean it's making money,
Yeah.
it's doing well. Audiences have choices now again, Brendan, which is great. It almost feels like like this coming weekend, I'm so excited about, with a movie that I could care less about in Super Mario, and then a movie I really like in Air, which we'll talk about next week.
Yep.
Because that's okay. The best of both worlds. That's a movie for the adults. That's a movie for the kids. This one's a little bit of both. John Wick's for like the teens and a little bit older, and you got all these movies still out there and people can go see them and they can really enjoy them. And
that's a good point. Like the things in theaters right now from an action film standpoint, they're all kind of wildly different.
They got some variety.
Yeah. That's
what I mean?
Yeah, that's a cool point.
It's a nice thing to see. And usually like April's aren't this like chaotic, you know what I mean? And have this much stuff packed in it. And then it's like, there's going to be like I said, there's going to be Renfield and Beau is Afraid and all these different things coming out. And it's kind of, I've been thinking about it because I've been thinking about like, I don't want to say anything. I don't want to jinx it, but I'm like, are we getting back to a time where like, those old things that you saw on the marquee where there were like 6 films up there and everybody got to like, say like, oh man, all 6 of those.
Which one do we want to see?
Yeah. Which one do you want to see? Oh, it doesn't matter. Like we'll see them all eventually. You know what I mean? But like, it's either one is a good option.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
For the average moviegoer. Right now, it's like any one of these are not obviously don't see Shazam, but like everything is a pretty good option and got good buzz and people are responding to them well. And if this can continue to do that and if we get a sequel out of this film, I would have never taken that bet with you of like, because I would have been like, no, this movie's not making its money back. This is a dumb venture, a couple of years ago.
Dog.
But, this is like we're dumping it in April and pray to God it makes like half of the budget back. And it might worldwide make it all back based off of word of mouth and legs. Like I'm going to say this on the podcast. Okay. I don't think you can thank Tom Cruise. There's one guy I think you got to thank right now.
Okay.
I think you got to thank Big Jim for coming back and kind of revitalizing the box office for a movie with legs. Because look at how Avatar, once again, it had the legs and people based on word of mouth and everything. Kind of now they're all coming back to the theater to see these action films or to see these things that they wouldn't usually try or maybe that they crap on. Like
I think it definitely helped having a movie like Top Gun Maverick in the same year at least. But
I think so.
I think if anything, if you want to give equal weight to them, like Big Jim and Tom Cruise should be shaking hands right now. At least
you could give Tom Cruise some credit, but like there were movies in the summer that didn't carry any legs or didn't have any, or that like didn't have nearly the impact that you would normally think that they would. And Top Gun just kind of dominated.
Yeah.
The thing about Avatar was that first film had 13 years of so much hate all over it from people on the internet.
You would think it would have tainted or something.
It would have not made $2.4 billion at the box office. The movie was 3 hours long. He literally said in a press conference, he's like, yeah, just go to the bathroom. I don't care. You're going to see it again. It doesn't matter. You know what I mean? And so I think having Avatar back and an audience being like, oh, wow, the sequel was good. It was elevated. It was actually like maybe better than the first one, if not better than the first one. I think that lends to help something like Dungeons and Dragons because they're like, oh, I heard that movie's actually good.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I'll give it a chance because if Avatar 2 wasn't as bad as I remember the first one being or whatever, maybe Dungeons and Dragons would do well. So I think that like that kind of helps. And yeah, like we're having yes, you're still having the low returns on things, but like the box office seems to be like having a good moment at the time. And that's a great thing for people like us because we love to see movies thrive. We may not agree with all the movies that are thriving, but damn, at least they are. You know what I mean? Can't say cinema's not dead right now, which is kind of cool.
I guess the moral of this whole conversation we're having right now is movies is basically
movies. Go to the theater.
Go to the theater. Yeah.
Sit next to a stranger.
Yeah. Talk about it afterwards.
Yeah. Maybe.
But don't be weird about it.
Well, or be weird about it.
Depends or be weird about it if that's your thing. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Maybe I shouldn't say it that way. Sometimes weird is a good thing.
If I see Brendan in a movie theater, I'm going to totally be weird with him.
Oh,
like,
I
that's
mean,
just
but
gonna
we
happen.
know each other. It's not weird. That's the thing.
It's going to be weird. Trust me. We're going down a
we're too
wild
biased.
ride.
Yeah, I mean, it would be
Yeah.
a good weird. Anyway, I think that's all we have to say about Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. For those of you listening, you can email us your thoughts at InSessionFilm@gmail.com or hit us up on social media at InSession Film. That'll conclude this review episode of InSession Film. If you haven't yet heard episode 528, where myself, Ryan, and Jay Ledbetter did our movie stars draft, each of us picking 5 movie stars to create our draft lists, you should listen to that. It was a great conversation, and you will be able to vote for those results on Twitter to say which one of the 3 of us had the best draft picks. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be very competitive. I'm looking forward to that. Be on the lookout for episode 529 next weekend. We'll be talking something related to the movie Air. I know you have already seen it, Ryan. We're talking about star-studded vehicles once again. Ben Affleck making his return to the director's chair. Looking forward to that movie. I know you've had some passionate thoughts about the film already. Yeah. I look forward to that conversation. So look out for episode 529, and then also look out for a review of Air coming out very soon. Ryan, thanks for joining me on this epic adventure through the dungeon, making our way through this whole escapade here. It was great talking to you once again. And for those of you listening, thanks for listening once again. We'll see y'all next time on the InSession Film Podcast.
We made USAA insurance to help you save. Take advantage of discounts when you cover your home and your ride. Discover how we're helping members save at USAA.com/bundle. USAA. Restrictions apply.